After 4 years, Pakistan has been taken off the infamous Grey List of Financial Action Task Force, the global watchdog on terror financing and money laundering. In a statement, FATF said it welcomes Pakistan's significant progress in improving its anti-money laundering. Though the multilateral watchdog said Islamabad will have to continue its work to further improve systems to combat terror financing and money laundering. FATF placed Pakistan on its list of countries under increased monitoring, or the so-called Grey List, in June 2018. Pakistan was given 2 action plans with 34 action items to fortify its ability to counter both fundraising by terrorists and money laundering. Significantly, for the first time, the FATF put Myanmar in the high-risk category, subject to a call for action. Iran and North Korea continue to be on the blacklist. Blacklisted countries face severe economic sanctions from international financial institutions, as a result of which their international trade suffers and they face international economic isolation. So what are the implications of removal of Pakistan from FATF Grey List? That and much more on this edition of Global Debate. I'm your host Kriti Mishra, and let's commence our discussion with illustrious panelists joining us on the program. Joining us through virtual platform, Manoj, Editor, Regulation Asia; Rahul Kumar, Roving Editor, India Narrative; and also joining us, Asanga Abeyagoonasekera, Geopolitical Analyst and Senior Fellow, the Millennium Project, Washington, D.C. I welcome all of you on Sunset TV and thank you so much for joining us. And Manoj, let me begin the program with you, and before we talk about the implications, it is not for the first time that Pakistan has been placed or removed from the Grey List. Now, I also have facts to corroborate that. It was previously included in the Grey List in 2008, was removed in 2012, then reinserted in the same year, removed in 2015, and reinserted again in 2018. Do you think that Pakistan has taken action against the terror groups and has laws, anti-terror financing laws, in line with international requirements?
Thank you, Kriti, for having me on. A real pleasure to be here. I guess, we've been covering anti-money laundering, and other regulations for the financial industry for about a decade now. I think one of the important points to note is really how influential the FATF is in encouraging countries to improve their AML regimes to align with international standards. NFI's financial institutions, they certainly take the FATF standings very seriously. So these decisions, they do impact countries' ability to maintain ties to the world's major economies and trading partners. In the case with Pakistan, certainly it has been a very challenging effort to get removed from the Grey List, the so-called Grey List. But essentially, we have seen significant reform efforts. They've essentially tried to overhaul their entire legal system around this. Numerous laws passed, strengthened the regulatory system for financial firms, investigations, prosecutions, confiscation of assets, beneficial ownership, proliferation finance. So all these different areas that they've kind of implemented new laws and they're working to enhance their regimes. Now, certainly I can understand there might be some concerns from some countries with the removal, but essentially, in the last 4 years, I think Pakistan has really seen, the severe impacts that being on the Grey List presents to them. And certainly we've now seen that there's very strong political will to stay off the Grey List. And essentially, just to explain kind of how this process works just a little bit, what the FATF and its regional bodies were looking to assess was what they called sort of essentially the legal frameworks. So the first step in all of these reform efforts is to put the legal frameworks in place, and then certainly over time you kind of implement those rules into the different sectors, and then the future mutual evaluations will assess the effectiveness. So certainly there's still a lot more work to be done. I don't think removal from the Grey List means Pakistan will stop its efforts. There's still a lot of work to be done in the investigation process, capacity building, practical training for law enforcement agencies, judges, prosecutors, even things like better analytical tools that law enforcement agencies will need. So all of these things will certainly need to be built up over time. You may say that Pakistan might not be at the same level as a international financial center like Hong Kong, where I'm based, or Singapore. But essentially, I think the important point is to note that there's a lot of progress that has been made. They were asked to complete a certain number of items, those 34 action items, and to date, it seems like they've done so as confirmed by the site visit in August. So I would try to see this in a positive light and just kind of take it for the progress that has been made so far after 4 or 5 years since those original commitments were made to improve the AML system.
All right. So as you said, that more steps need to be taken, of course, because of the fact that Pakistan falls short of the expectations of a robust anti-terror financing and anti-money laundering regime. But Rahul, now that it is out of the grey list, removed out of the grey list for the time being at least, what are the implications for Pakistan and what are the global implications?
Well, you see, people were expecting that Pakistan would be taken off the list for a while. We had an FATF team in August or September, right during the immense flooding that shook Pakistan completely. So right from that time, it was assumed that FATF is likely to get off that Pakistan is likely to get off the FATF list. Now the thing is, right at the same time, when the FATF team was in Pakistan, there were news reports that a lot of the flood relief, and was being provided by terror groups that had been proscribed by the UN. So we already had the militants, including the terror leaders, trying to help people when they were at the humanitarian and financial worst. And there were news reports that exactly at that time, some of these groups, international terror groups, were trying to recruit people as well. You see, this is a time when people, faced with such severe humanitarian crisis, are most vulnerable. So even though Pakistan got off the FATF Grey List, one is that it has not stopped its activities to sustain, to nurture, to train terror. The terror leaders, along with their foot soldiers, are very much present in Pakistan. They are visibly present amongst the people. This is one part. The other thing that is very important is, 1 month back, maybe 5 weeks back, a US court had indicted Pakistan's largest private bank, the Habib Bank, for actually funding terror, for funding Al-Qaeda. And the US court said that the funding by Habib Bank of Al-Qaeda led to a large number of deaths and injuries to people in Afghanistan. So what we're looking at is that just because diplomatic relations and the overall bilateral relations between US and Pakistan seem to have improved. Also relations between the West and Pakistan might have improved. But the fact is that Pakistan still has a very long way to go to be completely off the list. So the irony is, and here I will finish, that even as the world was taking measures to pull out Pakistan from the FATF list, Pakistan and its agencies, the government and also the military, they were actually, involved at the very moment in sustaining in terror. So, Pakistan, the international organizations, including FATF, will have to keep an eye, a very sharp eye on Pakistan.
Absolutely. I think that's a very valid point that you make. But let me take an India stand also here, Asanga, and I'm quoting India's stance here. It is in global interest that the world remains clear that Pakistan must continue to take credible, verifiable, irreversible and sustained action against terrorism and terror financing emanating from territories under its control. How do you read the statement?
Absolutely correct. I can agree with Rahul, who spoke before me. There is a serious the data that is captured in the region. There is a serious threat on cross-border terrorism, especially on terror cells, would increase. There was a reduction of the cross-border terror cells when the Grey List was imposed. So right now, by taking it off at a crucial juncture like this, when the region is completely fragile, it has witnessed, if you look at the global terrorism index, the highest amount of terrorism attack has been carried out in South Asia.
Yes.
So, looking at a fragile region, and with this, I think it's clear indication that cross-border terrorist cells would increase. Terrorism, as well as the anti-money laundering on terrorism measures would increase. There is a credibility of the FATF of the process here. I can relate to Sri Lanka in 2019 when Sri Lanka was taken off the Grey List in October 2019. Several months before, the terrorists use bitcoins, use money and terrorist financing for the Easter Sunday terror attack. So there is a credibility in the process already on the FATF process. So I think that at this moment, I would say it's a serious risk to the entire region.
All right, Manoj, do you agree with what Asanga said?
So I guess, certainly I can understand that there are risks. But ultimately, my view is that, generally speaking, and I've seen the reports about the cross-border terrorist camps and maybe rising and all of that. So essentially, they've enacted these new laws. Part of the issue is really confirming that they work in practice, right?
Yeah.
And that is something that is going to take a lot of work. But ultimately, I think that the removal from the FATF Grey List for now, it is better for the security and stability of Pakistan and the region. It's ultimately better to have Pakistan as a partner rather than a country that always feels that it's on the back foot. And it very clearly has been stated that it's expected to continue to strengthen its regime and do more to curb criminal activity. We've seen that sort of offers for help from China, from the EU, to kind of support Pakistan's efforts to strengthen its AML measures. I guess just another point, I think it's worth saying that despite the removal from the Grey List, I think individual banks, at least the ones we've talked to, they'll be making their own individual risk assessments for any transactions involving Pakistan. So it's very likely that it'll still take time for international banks, regional banks to stop thinking of Pakistan as high risk. And so, it's likely that we'll continue to see them apply enhanced due diligence measures for the foreseeable future. So essentially, the way I see it, this is a step forward, but you have to see the laws work in practice, and you have to really see Pakistan taking action when there are terrorist threats, money laundering threats, illicit finance, and all of that.
All right, Rahul, while Manoj talks about supporting the efforts, but Pakistani authorities have consistently desisted from taking demonstrable action against anti-India terror elements. Do you think the FATF member countries need to come together and put pressure on Pakistan to permanently abandon sponsoring, financing, harboring, or using terrorism as an instrument of state policy?
Sorry, is that for me?
That's right.
So ultimately, so I guess when India sort of also agreed to the removal, there again was that expectation that Pakistan will do more on this front. So I think there is already a significant amount of pressure on Pakistan to implement its measures and make sure that there are taken strong measures against any sort of terrorist activity. And they have targeted militant groups. I understand there was documentary evidence of its actions against designated terrorists taken so far. Again, a lot more needs to be done. But as far as I know, there is already a significant amount of pressure on Pakistan to do more and more. And kind of, in a way, I don't like this term, but I've heard it said that part of this is also a wait-and-see approach. You kind of need to give them an opportunity to see that their laws in practice do work and they are taking action. And by all means, they could revert back onto the grey list, but I don't think they want that. I don't think any of the politicians there want that. So yeah, I think we're going to have to see progress for them to stay off the grey list.
Rahul, a quick response from you before I move on to Myanmar on that, because I know that you wanted to make a point. Rahul, can you hear me?
Is that me?
That's right.
Right. I think the removal of FATF of Pakistan, it has both a good point definitely and certain worrisome points here. The good thing is that because of this massive, monstrous flooding that Pakistan has witnessed, the country should be able to access humanitarian aid and finance. So the good thing is that for the Pakistani people, the FATF, the removal of the FATF list comes at the right time. So Pakistan should be able to hopefully provide aid and humanitarian relief to its people. Unfortunately, the other side of the coin is, so we can't deal in Pakistan either from India or Afghanistan, the two closest neighbors that Pakistan shares a very large border with. So the situation of Afghanistan has really gone down badly, and we noticed that there's been a lot of movement of terror groups across the Pakistan and Afghan border. So that is a worrisome thing because then it has an impact on India as well. The other thing that India is facing for the last at least 2.5 years now is that Pakistan has been increasingly sending drones across the border into Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab with guns, grenades, drugs, weapons. And I think in just these last 10 months of this year, there were approximately 171 odd drones that flew into India. So yes, as Asang pointed out, till the time Pakistan was on the FATF list, the terror incidents and cross-border terrorism, it did definitely come down. So we will really need to keep the pressure on Pakistan, not just India, but it has to be the countries on the FATF committee as well as the international agencies.
Absolutely, very valid point there. And now let's shift focus from Pakistan to Myanmar. Now, Myanmar was moved from the grey list and is now on the black list of the FATF. Now, developments in a geostrategically important country could impact India in myriad ways. What is your word of advice?
Oh, is a question to me?
Yeah, Asang, that's for you.
Well, Myanmar is definitely, if you look at the regime, is questionable, and the progress that the regime has made has been very little. So I think the autocratic sentiment, the military rule, as well as the commitment towards cross-border, as well as terrorism issues or the AML, the CFT, so has been very minimal. So the vision on Myanmar is very clear, but the concern is that the impact Myanmar, as well as especially on Pakistan, which we discussed earlier, will have much more regional implication as well as impact to the entire region. I'm actually very pessimistic on this ruling, and I think that there will be definitely an increase in terrorism funding, as well as in mushrooming of terror cells, especially. So basically, Rahul mentioned J&K region. So I think there will be an increase in the flow, definitely towards to the J&K region, as well as so Myanmar is actually a clear case where there is no commitment. There's not been not significant commitment coming from the regime.
All right, I'm completely out of time, but before I wind up this show, Rahul, let's also talk about Russia. Now, Russia has been barred from participating in the future projects of the FATF. How do you read this development?
Well, with the global scenario that is unfolding before us and which continues to remain the way it is, Russia being debarred from participating in FATF is a loss for India, definitely. But the other apprehension is that if you keep Russia out of FATF decision making, Russia could turn rogue. Then we also know, when we look at Myanmar, that General Halane's relations have been very good with both China and with Russia. A lot of the weapons that were procured by Myanmar in the last years have been done with Russia.
Yes.
So you see, if you're keeping of Russia out of FATF decision making, and it is an important body, we might somewhere be losing Russia, and you actually never know that Russia might turn its direction the other way, turn its attention the other way.
All right, I'm completely out of time, gentlemen, on the show, but thank you so much for joining us. Manoj, Rahul and Asanga. Thanks so much, gentlemen. Well, viewers, that's all we could pack for you in this edition. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Sunset TV. Namaskar.